Brandt DXT grain carts have efficient unload speeds, large carrying capacities, unmatched durability, and reliable components that make sure your cart is working when you are. Lead the field with DXT grain carts from Brandt. Visit your local Brandt dealer for more information.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast as well. As I said, it is Friday, which means we'll probably have a bonus segment today on the program for the RealAg Issues Panel. We got Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith of RealAgriculture standing by. And we're going to break down some of the big issues of the week. We had Prime Minister Mark Carney make a big announcement this morning, which is a very, very big deal. And we'll get some of the reaction of the panel to that and a whole lot more. Now, if you have any feedback on today's program, you can definitely send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. Well, love your feedback. We had a lot of feedback this week. A lot of reaction to the column I wrote about Canada's bit of a dilemma for Prime Minister Carney when it comes to those EV tariffs and the canola tariffs and what's going on in the relationship with the U.S. A bit of a triangle of not so much love. And I feel sympathetic to the Prime Minister and some of his decisions he has going forward. Some great feedback, and we'll get to some of that today on the show as well. Hey, let's bring in the panel. We got, let's bring them in here, and there they are. Yes, look at them and their lovely faces. Lyndsey Smith, coming out of Ottawa, Ontario. Lyndsey, how are we doing?
You know what? We're doing well. It was another busy week, and I feel like I've been on pretty much every day this week because I kind of almost was. And it was so much fun. So
you did a great job.
The hop. Thanks. I had so much fun this week. It was so interesting. I had great guests.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wednesday's show was really fantastic. I thought it was really good. Jake Legui was on that day, Saskatchewan Farm. We're going to get some of your reaction to that a little bit later on. But you had one of my favorite people, and it used to be like an annual interview I got to do in person. It was with Don Close. He is a beauty.
Seriously. Why don't we have him on more? We had so much fun. A wealth of knowledge, and just really nice to get perspective from different people, different voices, where different people are situated, and it was lovely. So thanks to Dawn for making time for us. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, great job. Great job. And I appreciate you, because you're able to do that. I was able to go to Kansas City and go be the keynote speaker at the Terrain Conference, which was, Tegma Conference in Kansas City, which was, we'll talk about that a little bit here as well. Also, we've got Kelvin Heppner, who is off. I think we pulled him off the combine, Lyndsey. Kelvin Heppner out of Altona, Manitoba. How are we doing today, Kelvin?
Doing well. No, the wheat is still testing a little on the wet side. We're swathing. We're taking wheat down right now, but we've had off and on rains this week, so it's been a week of kind of standing by and hoping that we can maybe go tomorrow, kind of thing. So we're back in the swather today, but hoping to get rolling again tomorrow, possibly with the combines.
You need a grain dryer. You could start a little bit earlier.
We do need a grain dryer. That's the thing. It's still a little wet. I know some people, when it gets down to that 20% mark, and if they have a dryer, then they're able to go. We're still slightly above 20, so I'm not sure we're still going to be on the wet side tomorrow if we try tomorrow too. But yeah, a dryer in this type of situation would add a couple days probably of harvest potential.
We had the Pro Farmer Crop Tour this week. We had the WASDE report last week. A lot of attention on that U.S. corn and bean crop. And I was talking to somebody yesterday about the Western Canadian crop, and hard to get your head wrapped around how to properly describe it. After talking to a lot of people, I have fallen back to just we're average or maybe we're a little bit above. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, Kelvin. that seems to be the consensus out there for a lot of people that have covered a lot of the geography.
Yeah, and it's a matter of timing and when that rain came. There's been actually, when you look at the precipitation maps over the last couple of weeks for Western Canada, there's been a lot of the maps have returned to kind of more normal moisture amounts for the growing season, or within range of that. But a lot of that rain came in the last couple of weeks, which is on the late side for a lot of spring cereals and canola, that type of thing. And so whether that helped yield or not, certainly this week we saw a lot of damage from violent weather this week, with hail and winds and stuff near the finish line that you don't like to have that happen when you're this close to the finish line. So it's I think there's a lot up in the air in terms of what the timing was, and I think it could be better than. Certainly will be better results than what it looked like potentially in large parts of the prairies back in June when things were real dry and it looked like things were just burning off. But yeah, how much of a rebound there's been, that's I think to be determined in the next couple of weeks as we hear reports from the field. Yeah,
Lyndsey, I shared a photo yesterday of a hybrid rye crop from around the High River, Alberta region, where 2 days away from harvest, 100 plus bushel crop out there, flattened.
Yeah. We're seeing, and hats off to everybody who's willing to share, seeing just the size of the hail that came through in a pretty wide area as well. We've got images of, pulse crops that were literally, as Kelvin says, like ready to combine, and looked actually pretty decent, and just absolutely decimated. So it's always a heartbreaker, but yeah, this late in the season, it really stings because you've almost got it in the bin. So yeah, it is. I mean, it's the way it goes. It's really difficult. It is interesting in this context, though, to your point, Shaun, about like trying to nail things down. I do feel like this is a season that, like here in Ontario, the drought got way worse for some areas than we thought it would. Other areas managed actually to sort of squeak by or continue to, and now there's a bit more rain in the forecast. So it does seem like, some of the rain came maybe too late for some, but maybe it'll take the worst of the pain out for some areas. We'll have to see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've got a lot to chat about today. We've got the announcement from Prime Minister Carney. We've got, it has been a bit of a wild week, following up on top of last week. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a break. We've got more of the RealAg Issues Panel, Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith, and myself, Shaun Haney, all three of us with Real Agriculture. We'll be back right after this.
Protect your anhydrous ammonia application earlier than normal this fall. Defend against potential losses and protect your bottom line with new Centuro A-Pro Nitrogen Stabilizer. Patented active ingredient pronitridine offers agronomically effective protection where it matters most, below ground. The new concentrated formulation lowers application rates. Start early with Centuro A-Pro as part of your nitrogen management plan. Contact your local retailer or visit centuro.ca for more information today.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Nearly 600 trials demonstrate that Rhizosorb allows growers to use as much as 50% less phosphorus without compromising yields in major row crops such as corn and soybeans. Multi-year, multi-location replicator research trials demonstrate that Rhizosorb at reduced application rates maintains or increases yields without lowering soil phosphorus levels. If you have additional questions about Rhizosorb, please contact your Phospholutions regional sales manager or visit phospholutions.com.
And we're back here on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Hey, we played a clip of it. I think it was on Tuesday's show. Yeah, it was Tuesday. We ruminating with RealAg. great podcast dedicated to beef production, hosted by Amber Bell of RealAgriculture, Ruminating with RealAg. Great new episode. We played a tiny clip of it. Tools and tech that you can use on the ranch. There's a whole plethora, great list of episodes that Amber's been doing. She puts a lot of hard work into it, a lot of effort, and great outcome. It's a fantastic podcast. So you can check it out on the Real Agriculture feed, the fire hose of all of our content, or on YouTube, or as well search Ruminating with RealAg wherever you get your podcasts. We've got the RealAg Issues Panel, Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith, myself, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture, and I guess, Lyndsey, we just heard at the time of us recording this show, Prime Minister Mark Carney. I guess, how do we view this? Is he backing down? Is he showing weakness, or is this a smart play to remove some of these retaliatory tariffs against the U.S.? So
just as we were recording this show, Prime Minister Mark Carney had a press conference, and the nuts and bolts of it are that he's announced that Canada will drop the retaliatory tariffs on CUSMA compliant goods. He calls it a match of the U.S. So the U.S., of course, has not been applying extra tariffs on CUSMA compliant goods. So essentially respecting the USMCA CUSMA agreement. And so Canada will follow suit. What I found interesting is in the preamble to making the announcement, because the announcement in and of itself is, it is what it is. He made reference to that countries now must buy access to the U.S., and you buy access through several different means. And I think that this is an interesting sort of way to tee up what we may see going forward. So Carney sort of said, countries now through tariffs, through investment into the U.S., through agreements, etc., are going to have to buy access to the U.S. market, and that is the way we essentially have to approach this trading partner, and that essentially, Trump has transformative, there's that word again, transformed how the U.S. fundamentally trades with its global partners. So the long and the short of it is that Carney has dropped some of these retaliatory tariffs in this new sort of approach to doing business with the U.S.
Kelvin, one thing that's listening to that presser that's very clear to me, and some people are going to say, listen, there's no difference between Carney and Trudeau. We can have the discussion, but the one thing that is different for sure is the way that he is, one, trying to deal with President Trump, and two, it's the way that he communicates. It is much more clear about what he intends to do and how he is thinking about this trading relationship.
Yeah, and some of that's part of his brand, that he is more of an expert on these types of topics than Trudeau, and there was always an aspect of Trudeau's, I don't know if it was his cadence or his style of speaking, that sometimes came across as condescending and more antagonistic than when I think Carney in some cases could read the exact same text as what Trudeau read, and it would sound like he was more authoritative on the topic, that type of thing, especially when we're talking about trade and economic issues. So he did emphasize, and this is something that we've talked about here on the show many times as well, that Canada maintains, like Carney said, the best trading deal relationship with the U.S. of any country in terms of overall tariff rates, and he, I think, used the number, Lyndsey, 85% of our trade right now is still tariff free, which is not certainly not doesn't offer any peace to those in the steel, aluminum sectors, the copper, lumber, the certain sectoral where the sectoral tariffs are applied at quite steep rates, and we're seeing some of that in the agriculture manufacturing world as well now too. So sure, Carney can. I think there's a bit of a risk there where this is something that Chrystia Freeland used to do when she was the finance minister, deputy prime minister, say things are great in Canada. It doesn't matter. Inflation is so high. We're relative to the rest of the G7 or the OECD. We're in such good shape. Well, those types of stats don't really matter to average Canadians or to voters. Those things, it's how they feel it in their pocketbook. And I think in some ways, reducing these counter tariffs, the retaliatory tariffs, is we're going to see some cost de-escalation on the Canadian side, because who's been paying these counter tariffs? It's been customers here in Canada. And so whether we're talking canola seed imports, seed production for a lot of canola, some of that happens in the U.S., and that seed was facing a tariff coming into Canada looking at the 26 growing season. Whether we're talking equipment for in barns, machinery in some cases was facing a retaliatory tariff from the Canadian government side. So in some ways, that's positive for our pocketbooks here on the north side of the border.
Yeah, so let's go ahead, Lyndsey.
But it is elbows down. It's not elbows up anymore.
The working title I've got is Carney makes elbow room for Trump over these tariffs.
Clever. Yeah. That is crafty.
You know what? Words matter, Shaun. But I wanted to add in, Kelvin, on your point, we saw inflationary figures for Canada, 1.7%, but where we still saw inflation was on the food side. And I would say for anyone who does any of the grocery shopping, I think grocery stores have been making they've been making it very easy to see what's been influenced by tariff costs, and we are seeing food inflation in this last go certainly was up well above the average. So definitely starting to feel the impact of some of these tariffs for sure.
So do we think that this, in terms of going back to Lyndsey, the reference of buying access to the U.S. market, do we think that there was a threat here that if Canada didn't relent on this, that Trump was going to escalate somewhere else, and that we're maintaining the status, kind of backing down in just to maintain the status quo, kind of the same messaging that was out there around the digital services tax a couple of weeks ago?
When I hear him say that, I think that's it. Like, I'm tying that to some of the things that President Trump has said regarding that's the justification for the flat tariff that some countries have faced, is that it's essentially like a subscription fee, a licensing fee in order to be able to sell into the U.S. market. But that's not exactly in line with Carney removing some of these tariffs in this situation. So I'm not exactly sure what he's referring to there, or is he just trying to speak President Trump's language? So it sounds like he's kind of, okay, listen, I get it. I'm speaking your verbiage. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean this announcement does come after they did have a telephone conversation yesterday, which was the first time that we know of anyway that they officially spoke in quite some time. So the readout on that isn't terribly descriptive, but potentially, this is Carney exactly that, sort of falling in line with, again, using the word transformative, which I think Trump likes to be called. I think that he is trying to fundamentally change how the U.S. does business, or how countries do business with the U.S. is, I guess, the more correct way to say that. So, what does it mean, though? I mean, I think like when we talked about, and Shaun, you pointed this out as well with the digital sales tax, that is the way that he negotiates, you just take away the objections, right? So, Shaun, you pointed this out. So the digital sales tax was a rub. Take that irritant away. These retaliatory tariffs, at least recently anyway, have definitely been, hey, Canada and China are the only ones that retaliated. Take it away. So is this sort of the style of like, let's just take more of these irritants off the table?
Well, I think
that's the opposite of his campaign message. That's the opposite of what he ran on in the federal election a couple of months ago.
Yeah, no, but you say what you got to do to get elected. Come on, Kelvin.
That's right.
You're right. No, I know that. Yeah. I know that, but you eventually run out of things to take off the table, and you got to stand your ground at some point. And that's, I think, Carney has yet to draw a line on any of these things.
Well, it would appear that way. We don't know what the conversation is on that phone call, or what's being said behind the scenes. I think what we're going to hear from a lot of the conservative side of the aisle is that he is being weak, and he is not standing up for Canada. And he's not standing up for Canadian workers. We definitely have seen the Conservative Party really attach itself to the worker this week for sure. What I can share is that, in the middle of when Bloomberg and other media outlets were announcing that this was going to happen prior to Carney's press conference, I was in the middle of guest hosting AgriTalk, and I had Tom Sell from Combest, and also Jim Wiesmeyer from Wiesmeyer's Perspectives podcast. And we were talking about it. Their both reaction immediately was smart move by Carney. He's showing flexibility. That was that reaction from the U.S. side of the aisle. Well, we'll have to see how that works out. He's in a bind. Like this is not. We cannot pretend that this is somehow not shark-infested waters that he is trying to sort of navigate Canada through here. This is a major challenge for somebody that, is very early in their time in politics. That is shark-infested waters is probably putting it understating it.
And that's just early here on a Friday afternoon. Who knows by the end of the day how many more sharks have appeared or different twists and turns. To me, this is the kind of Friday where we could have more news come out on this file as well at some point.
We could just make this a 6-hour show and just keep going.
Yeah, exactly.
I have things to do, Shaun. Come on.
Okay. Well, we've got more topics to cover. I know that. And we're going to do that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Every seed starts a story at Alliance Seed. A seed holds the promise of successful harvest each year. From the first day of planting, as your crop grows and navigates the challenges of weather, to the final load from the last field, it all begins with the seed you choose. Trust Alliance Seed to guide your choices by providing the expertise and information needed to match the right seed to your farm's unique potential. Start your success story with cereal and pulse varieties by visiting allianceseed.com. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is a video series that showcases the latest in canola research and production agronomy. Learn from some of the best at your own pace through quick and timely producer-focused videos available on our YouTube channel. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is the quickest way to keep up to date on all the latest in canola production. Boost your canola IQ with the Canola School, brought to you by BASF, and visit canolaschool.com.
Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola, it's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today. Get ready for outstanding emergence in 2026. Who doesn't love great emergence? Have your Vaterstad seeding and planting equipment inspected at an authorized dealer by November 15th, and you'll receive a 15% discount on needed replacement parts. Contact your local Vaterstad dealer to learn more. November 15th, 15% off. I like discounts on my repair and maintenance bill, and I'm sure you do as well. We got the RealAg Issues Panel here on RealAg Radio. Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner, myself, Shaun Haney. And Kelvin, we were talking about tariffs and the impact on trade and businesses in North America. You posted a story late yesterday, an example of when rubber hits the road on tariffs. In this case, it has to do with steel, and it's a big issue for American farmers.
Yeah, this is potentially a huge issue it's a story that's still developing, and partly because I think in some cases the players here, the companies involved, don't want to stick their neck out and become a poster child when it comes to enforcement of tariffs, and they're hoping that they can navigate this with minimizing the impact at this point. I'd say the dust is still settling on this, but on Tuesday we saw the U.S. Department of Commerce announce more than 400 additional categories of imports immediately subject to the Section 232 tariffs, so a 50% duty on steel and aluminum content in all these products if that steel and aluminum wasn't smelted in the U.S. And that list of products includes tractors, combines, combine headers, which is significant for several companies here in Canada that manufacture combine headers and go into the U.S. market. That will be on display at the Farm Progress Show next week. Grain carts, depending on how they're categorized, are affected. Grain handling equipment, so augers, for example. Again, several companies that make augers here in Canada that are sold across North America and around the world that are now subject to these tariffs. And so these companies right now are navigating this, trying to figure out how they can supply the U.S. market, whether they can. In some cases, there was inventory that reached the U.S. border earlier this week, and American dealers that had ordered this equipment said, hang on, we don't want it anymore if we have to pay a 50% price increase on that unit because of this tariff. And so now those manufacturers are sitting either with inventory at the border or they brought it back. It's no longer moving south. It's at a standstill at least for now as they're sorting through all of this. So And this is, of course, this affects used equipment too. There's been some well covered or stuff that's received a lot of attention on social media, on X, when it comes to there's a custom harvester in the U.S. who bought a combine in Saskatchewan, and it's stuck at the border because of needing to determine where the steel and aluminum in that used combine came from. Because HS codes, when you're importing something, there's no difference applied whether it's a new or used piece of equipment or product coming across the border, and so they apply regardless. And so, yeah, a lot of concern right now, especially companies that make the things that are on this list, and U.S. farmers that are used to having access to these brands of machinery certainly are going to feel the pain if this isn't dealt with in short order.
Yeah, and when we're talking about a 50% tariff, it's not. The importer is not like just going to swallow that. The exporter is not just going to swallow that. The tariff is swallowing the margin, and so it's basically the business is
there's
not
no 50% margin. Yeah, there's no 50% margin on ag equipment. So for example, let's say you have a combine header that you appreciate a certain brand. There's some brands here in Canada that make well reputable combine headers. You've got MacDon, you have Honeybee, for example, and say you have a $150,000 header at the border. All of a sudden, it's $225,000 is the price on that. That is something that no farm and no dealer is going to bite that type of cost escalation unexpected. And so where does that go? And that's the situation that some companies are finding themselves in right now. We're still We've got good sources on this in terms of companies speaking with us about this, some of the companies that are affected. But at the same time, like I said, there's a reluctance to comment on the record because you don't want to be kind of the brand that is at the forefront of this problem. I think, again, I'm filling and connecting some dots here, but I think companies are reluctant to be the poster child in the headlines when it comes to this issue and potentially being affected by these tariffs.
And I think one of the key things here, and as and Kelvin, you alluded to it, so it's one of the people, Ryan Sorrells, is a custom operator on X who's been pretty vocal about this, and he's sharing also how difficult this is. He's trying to run a custom harvesting business, and he needs certain equipment. It's usually used or older equipment that is specific to him running his job or running his business. And here is where, again, government policy at times very much can run counter to the timeliness of our ag industry. So yes, there's the big picture, like overall economic fallout of all of this. Yes, that is very real. But this is an example of like where time is of the absolute essence, right? Crops are maturing as we speak or are mature. And so whether it's, to actually kick off your custom harvest season, or if it's a specific upgrade, or if it's to replace a unit that gets burned or crashed or just stops working, like this is absolutely paramount that equipment moves when it's needed and when someone has ordered it or whatever. This isn't just about, a fancy, shiny new piece of equipment. This is about the ability to actually harvest a crop that has been out there since April, May, whatever it might be. And I'm hopeful, at least, that on the American side, that, farmers and ag businesses are calling their representatives and saying, like, we need to be able to harvest these crops. Like this is, and a 50% tariff essentially closes the border to movement.
Yeah, because
right now you got to prove that it's like so. Again,
Yes.
the onus a lot of this stuff around escalation at the border over the last number of months. It's about you're assumed guilty until you prove your innocence, kind of thing.
Exactly.
And here too, these companies now are scrambling, and they have been because they kind of saw this writing on the wall. They've been scrambling to figure out where their steel and aluminum came from, where it was smelted, and in a capitalistic society that we live in, that's very difficult to do. Plus, the U.S. doesn't have capacity to do this stuff, especially on the aluminum side of thing. When you get into the environmental standards involved in smelting aluminum, and a lot of that happens, of course, in China and Asia and countries over there. So it's not something that these businesses can quickly pivot to just having their supply chain based in the U.S. to get U.S. steel and U.S. aluminum.
That's the key point.
And that's the point. That's the justification that the Trump administration has given in terms of implementing these tariffs.
Well, yeah. So on new machinery, the answer would be, well, listen, just move your manufacturing to the United States, relocate, reshore.
But the steel, you can't get the steel and aluminum supply.
I agree with you. I'm saying that's what the pattern of talk, the argument would be. Okay, In this case, this is a good example because it's used. That even if the reshoring was successful, it doesn't change this situation. It's still a major issue for U.S. farmers. So something we got to follow very closely. Okay, that is a complicated one, but we've got more issues to talk about here on RealAg Radio. We'll do that when we come back. Shaun Haney, Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith, back right after this.
Soil health is under pressure, but real solutions start below the surface. Black Earth offers a full suite of humic solutions, from high-purity granules to powder, liquid, and soluble formulations, all powered by pure Humulite. Formulated for performance, backed by consistency, trusted by growers worldwide from one of the world's rarest reserves. Grow stronger with the power of Black Earth Humulite. Learn more from Mine to Market at blackearth.com.
At Proven Seed, we know that farming in Western Canada doesn't just teach us, it shapes us. Here we face challenges with resilience, innovation, and grit born from decades of experience. We battle the conditions again and again because growing crops here isn't just what we do, it's who we are. We're raised to adapt just like you, with varieties grown specifically for your local conditions. Visit provenseed.ca/raised to adapt to hear our story.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. This segment's brought to you by Pioneer 100 Series. It's the highest yielding Pioneer brand canola hybrids ever. This isn't just better canola, it is different canola. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more. We're already thinking about the 26 crop. 25 is flying by here. We got Shaun Haney, myself, as well as Lyndsey Smith and Kelvin Heppner of RealAgriculture. And Lyndsey, when you were guest hosting on Wednesday, one of your guests was Jake Legui. He is the chair of Saskweat. He is also a farmer from, of course, Fillmore, Saskatchewan. And he wrote a column that was posted on LinkedIn and his website, sharing his thoughts. Jake's a very well thought guy. And sharing his thoughts on what's going on here with these China tariffs. I guess, what was your takeaways?
And thanks to Jake for saying yes. I know it's certainly a busy time, and that actually sort of plays into, I think Jake's column and in his interview, he does try to capture just how difficult it is to sort of wrap your head around, the tariff of this magnitude, essentially the blocking of canola into China at such a crucial time. I think in his own words, the column, he sort of wrote it and published it and sort of in the heat of the moment. And in the interview, he does sort of step back a bit and recognize that, and Shaun, this is in line with the column that you wrote as well about autos versus agriculture, that, realistically, the Canadian government is in a bit of a pickle here, right? And it's serious on many different fronts, and it's not as simple as just lifting the EV tariffs, in that may not change anything, for one thing. That may tick off the Americans, which, earlier in today's show, we just talked about how that relationship is going and how we're potentially trying to navigate that. So it is more nuanced than just tariffs on, tariffs off. There's more characters at play here than just China and Canada. It really is more complicated than that. At the same time, I think what was interesting from Jake, as well as in hearing from Gunter the next day on the rapid fire, I think that for many farmers, and Jake said this as well, for many farmers in Western Canada that maybe have not been proponents of a biofuel mandate, this may be what shifts the needle for a lot of them, in that realistically, the U.S. market is largely a biofuel-based market, and perhaps increasingly so, or maybe in danger of being less so, which is another risk. But that, ultimately, if China is off the table for any length of time, this is still a giant industry that has a valuable product that can be used, and we could be using more of it at home, potentially. So what does that look like going forward? So I do think for many, this, depending on how long this goes on, could start to shift how people feel about a biofuel mandate here in the U.S. and perhaps in other jurisdictions as well.
Well, one of the takeaways I had at TEGMA this week, I had a little bit of it in my presentation, and it was interesting. 3 different speakers, none of us had chatted beforehand, all had a real strong biofuel policy message to the audience there. And Kelvin, it's interesting because as we look at whether there's supply of crop in Canada, the supply of the crop that is in the United States, there are 2 ways to chew through the inventory as we see commodity prices really slump. One is exports. There's not a lot of low-hanging fruit out there, especially with the difficulty that India and China are being currently at the moment for both the U.S. and Canada. But the other is biofuels. And I guess it's going to be a bit of a test of our will in terms of how 2 feet in we want to be on biofuels as a way to get through demand. And I think probably there's a long-term view and there's a short-term view. What are your thoughts, Kelvin?
To me, yeah, it isn't a perfect solution. It is a flawed solution that comes with, Lyndsey alluded to, risk. There's major political risk in relying on biofuel mandates for demand. And that's something that we see the U.S. industry certainly invest a lot of resources into mitigating that political risk. And we haven't seen the same extent of that in Canada. And that's one of the reasons why we don't have the same amount of biofuel demand for our crops that we grow. So I'm somewhat uncomfortable with the idea of needing to rely on a government mandate to stimulate that demand and the sustainability of that in the long term, to use sustainability in a different sense there, I guess. But it might be a safer bet than relying on China and India for demand in the long term. And I do think that we do need to also keep in mind that ultimately, this is, may sound like a broken record here, but this is something that we've talked about and many people have talked about for decades. China, ultimately supply and demand still apply when it comes to the Chinese market. And when they need canola, when those crush plants are running empty in China and they don't have something to fill them, they will return to the market. Ultimately, that will dictate the timing of this. And I think we should also be paying close attention to Canada's canola exports to the United Arab Emirates again, just like last time China blocked our canola exports, or the exports from Richardson and Viterra, the 2 largest exporters a couple of years ago. Exports to the UAE spiked, and crush capacity there was utilized to process canola and then have it disappear into the world market somewhere not far from China, probably. So I think that's something we should pay attention to. Ultimately, supply and demand still apply in the situation and will dictate some of the timing around this as well.
Well, and the other thing, we were chatting about this morning on AgriTalk, is that, we've gone from where a U.S. trade deal with India is like right around the corner, like it's going to be announced, to where it's like a frosty relationship at this point. Modi was out, I think it was yesterday, saying that he will not have any trade deal with anyone, essentially, that potentially hurts Indian farmers. So, I think on that one, the U.S. is figuring out because Canada has had a lot of agricultural trade with India over the years. Pulses is a great example. They're just kind of finding out what it's like to deal with India, because it's not fun. It's very difficult, and that's the hard part. I remember going back to Greg Dowd, former USTR ag negotiator, who's now with the National Milk Producers Federation. He was the opening speaker for the USDA Outlook Forum back this past spring. And one of the things he said there that stuck with me is there is no low-hanging fruit here. It is about incremental increases in volume. And if you look, for example, at that U.S. corn crop, the jump, if they hit 188.9 bushels per acre on corn, and some of the soybeans hit their potential, those aren't incremental changes. That's a pretty significant jump in the size of the crop, also with the acreage increase on corn. And so, Jeff Cooper from RFA said it. Biofuel demand is not keeping pace with the supply of the crop. So it's there's some hefty challenges out there. But Lyndsey, I like this week about how canola. I gonna have to look what it did today here, but canola has had some strength in the past number of days here, working its way back to where it was when this tariff was announced last week, which is, I think, farmers need to be paying attention to that, and they should be encouraged that maybe we've, hopefully, fingers crossed, we've maybe put in a low.
Well, and so this is the other sort of part to this, is that I think, sometimes the knee-jerk reaction is like a market drops and it's like, this is just value that has just disappeared. But at the same time, and we've seen this before when announcements happen that the price pulls back and then, potentially sort of ticks back up, thank goodness. And so, like, again, back to the interview with Jake, or in talking with other people in the industry, it's not about government handouts necessarily to say, like, oh my gosh, this is a ruined market and we need ad hoc payments. It really, what we've been hearing from the industry is like, this is a serious blow to the Canadian canola industry, and we need better plans than what we are currently functioning under because of things like this. And that realistically, this idea that we can have stable and transparent markets with China is just not necessarily feasible. So what does the overarching plan look like? Like, how are the other ways we're going to manage this risk, right? So, and I don't want to in any way diminish how stressful or how difficult this is for canola growers. Like, these are livelihoods we're talking about. This is very serious. But realistically, I think that the industry is on a good path of saying, like, what are the bigger picture, longer term things we need to be addressing that make this a crop that is profitable on Western Canadian farms. So in the long term.
Yeah, I'm looking at NOV canola, and we're at 666.6.
That's a very auspicious number.
Very.
Sorry.
Very.
Yeah. Somebody better get out their Bible.
Yeah. Well, and we're about $13 a ton off of where we were at the open of the day of the tariff announcement. So we it's not where we want it to be, but it has been encouraging this week to see that market eke its way back to where it was. But we're still off that 700 where we were back in the spring. Kelvin, go ahead.
To me, these conversations about, the market rebounded, and we saw the same discussion after the March tariffs were implemented on oil and meal. The market rebounded. Well, you can say the market rebounded, but who knows where it would be if it wasn't for this. So to me, that is only relevant if we're talking about government needing to bail out farmers because of negative profitability. To me, it's not. It isn't useful to have a conversation about, markets are back to where they were on the tariff announcement. Well, it doesn't mean that they wouldn't be $30 higher or $2 a bushel higher if it wasn't for China blocking imports. So to me, that conversation isn't of value unless it's in the sense of government needing to bail out or needing to because of an existential impact to producers and industry. But
I don't know. I just kind of grew up in that the market knows best. So, like, there's a lot of what
the market does know best, and the market, it doesn't mean it's, and so it could be $2 a bushel higher if it wasn't for if Chinese demand was on the table as well.
Right, but you
always play what else.
China's going to potentially buy canola from Australia. I don't know. Like I kind of disagree in the sense that the price is what it is, and there's a futures market for a reason. And if all of a sudden, like, if you look out into November of 26 and the price was, substantially higher, you could say, like, okay, yeah, if there wasn't those tariffs, then the price, like, that's kind of what the price is. There's a lot of factors.
It is what the price is. Yeah, exactly. But it doesn't mean that the tariff's not having an impact. Because that's the underlying message that is often conveyed in this, and it doesn't mean the tariff's not having an impact. The tariff is having an impact. It's just the market is reflecting what it thinks the balance of supply and demand is. That's where it sets the price.
Yeah, well, it's definitely having an impact on Canadian exports. I'm not going to disagree on that one for sure. And we're going to take a break. We've got more coming up here on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, right after.
Dairy producers wanted for the first American Dairy Expo, November 5th and 6th at the Champlain Valley Exposition in Vermont. Grab a free breakfast, tour the 200 Company Dairy Innovation Trade Show, meet Olympian and dairy producer Elle St. Pierre, and take in the Dairy Delivers Classroom. November 5th is Dairy Fest at 4 p.m., featuring a massive dairy buffet, live entertainment, and industry networking. Full details, discount coupon, and pre-expo tickets available at AmericanDairyExpo.com.
It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
I got to say, I am so excited about this weekend. You know why, Lyndsey?
Why?
It is week 0.
Sports.
Yeah, very sports. We are very sporty here today. It is week 0. It is the start of college football season. And I can't wait tomorrow till noon Eastern. I'll be locked in on the couch watching TV, Kansas State, Iowa State, Farmageddon, the battle of two great ag schools, head-to-head in Dublin, Ireland. Dublin is a great city. If you've never been to Dublin, you should go there. The last couple of years, college football has opened in week 0 in Dublin. Can you imagine a whole bunch of people from Manhattan, Kansas, and Ames, Iowa, taking over the city of Dublin? That would be a party.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can't wait.
I will not be watching that.
You should.
Under a spike in Guinness sales, will think it'll be noticeable.
Yeah, and
Advil
the next morning. No doubt is.
Yeah, exactly.
As well. Hey, any game that's nicknamed as Farmageddon feels very much in line with what Real Agriculture should be paying attention to and covering. Now, last week we talked about the EPA making an announcement related to emissions and DEF. Okay. And Kelvin, you did some research trying to find the Canadian angle of this. Is this something that the ECCC is considering in Canada? What did you find out?
No, it took some time because the folks at Environment and Climate Change Canada also needed to dig into it and some of the details as to what the policy change was on the U.S. side, and it was, Lyndsey can explain it better, but in terms of the DEF policy change announced by EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin last week, vehicles with diesel exhaust fluid, when it runs out, are not going to lose their power for a certain amount of time, is my understanding of it. And Environment and Climate Change Canada says the EPA seal that an engine or a vehicle will require in the U.S. or under this new guidance from Administrator Zeldin is not changing at all, and so the requirements for the Canadian market are not changing. We shouldn't expect any change when it comes to how DEF vehicles, whether trucks or tractors, work on the Canadian side of the border. It doesn't have an impact in terms of approval of vehicles off the assembly line.
Lyndsey, what are your thoughts?
Well, so further to this, in case you missed it, the EPA did announce that essentially the derating, so that power loss or that, limping it along when you get a sensor that says you're out of DEF, even if you're not, because that's also part of this, is that sometimes you are out of DEF and sometimes you're not. The sensor just says you are. So the EPA is going to or has said that, we're going to extend the amount of time that you can continue working with one of these sensors going off, is basically the long and the short of it. So to Kelvin's point, it doesn't really change actually the rules about, how the engines have to function. It just changes the programming of the derating. We did, though, ask on our poll if Canada should follow suit. So on RealAgriculture.com, we asked, should we, follow the U.S. DEF decision? And we had quite a good turnout, 283 votes. 76% said totally we should follow suit.
Well, of course we should.
Down with DEF. Yeah, but 12% down with DEF. But 12% said I only drive older models or brands that don't use DEF. So there's that.
So basically they're on side with that decision. So how many people are outside of those two categories? My math is terrible.
Yeah, a handful, basically. Yeah, that's basically what it comes down to. So, I mean, to the point of what DEF does, it is important. Nitrous oxide is a really bad greenhouse gas. It is one of the emissions that would come out of a diesel engine. DEF reduces that amount. So, and the EPA is not getting rid of DEF. It's not getting rid of emission standards.
Emission standards haven't changed.
Exactly. No. The emission standards are the same. It's just that the amount of time you can go where a sensor says you're out of DEF, which maybe you're not, where a sensor says you're out of DEF, you won't lose power for quite some time. Now, granted, that what's the real world impact of this? Yes, it potentially means more emissions during a short amount of time until you do either refill or fix the sensor, but at least you're not stranded left somewhere with a derated engine while you scramble to go find some DEF and or reset a sensor. So, I mean, on the grand scheme of things, is this, an environmental catastrophe? No, the standards are the same. But yeah, I think most people would actually be perfectly fine not having to use DEF at all, but would on our poll anyway, would prefer that Canada follow suit and not derate engines that are out of DEF.
Yeah, and what I said this last week, I thought it was a very reasonable policy from EPA. Some people don't think they've gone far enough. They would like to see them go full. Let's change this sucker. Exactly. But I've heard from a lot of U.S. farmers though has been concerned that okay, great, but I got to is there enough people at the dealerships to do all these updates of current models through the chip updates? Right. To make your machine have buy you more time before you got to refill with DEF, and there's a lot of doubt of that. Yeah, the reality is that so the EPA change is for 2027 models. I think forward would essentially roll off the line with the chip already essentially putting these new rules in place. Yeah. So it is sort of one of those hey, thanks, but the reality of how many people will be able to actually benefit from this change immediately, that could be a challenge because of exactly that, of waiting for the guidance of what it's supposed to be and then actually getting it done. So going forward, this is what it will be, but immediately maybe has less of an impact. I know for many of you think that Kelvin makes all of his money here at RealAgriculture, or running the farm. It's actually FanDuel. And Kelvin, yes. What we heard this week from FanDuel is that they're partnering with the CME. This is good news for you. Not only get to get the sports gamble, but you also now can maybe trade the corn future. Yeah, when I'm checking my phone here during the show, I'm checking my FanDuel account, not X or social media for news, email. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, they're bringing event-based betting, I guess, in some ways, financial position taking to commodity and currency markets. They didn't say corn specifically, but I'm curious whether we could see basically retail sports bettors impacting the corn market someday, or live cattle future or whatever. Live cattle futures, exactly. I feel like Shaun was involved in this so that we could have some of the biggest NHL stars join us on this podcast. I feel like Shaun's really the one who's been working at this behind the scenes, not Kelvin. I do not have an account. You need to recognize your weaknesses. I will say this. I rarely gamble on sports because I pretty much watch a wide, I'll watch anything. Yeah. I would be a degenerate sports gambler. Yeah. So I try you gamble with your heart, Shaun. You get really into it. And you gamble with your emotions. The only sports betting I've ever done and probably will ever do is $2 show bets, chicken bets as they're called, on horse racing live. So, and I never go anymore. So that's about the long and the short of it. For many years, we've had complaints, of course, in agriculture about speculators and the impact of speculators on our commodity markets. Well, in many cases, they provide liquidity, which is necessary for markets to function. But can only imagine if retail investors or retail sports bettors, if a headline comes out about last week's USDA number, for example, what kind of impact? And look at what's happened in some of the other stock markets, whether you're talking about GameStop or GameStop a couple of years ago, or meme stocks, all those types of things. What if all of a sudden ag commodity is affected by that? That would mess with our livelihoods in such a big way. That, to me, that's a huge risk of, or at least something that hopefully regulators are considering somewhere. Great on the long side, not so great on the short side. That, yeah, for sure. Hey, we're out of time here. Oh. What's that? Yeah, we'll continue. I was going to say, but okay. We'll continue in the bonus. I promise you. Hey, Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner, thanks for joining us. If you have any feedback, shaney@realagriculture.com. Have a great weekend and cheers, everybody. We're in the bonus. Lyndsey, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, if this whole FanDuel thing actually goes through and is like into ag markets, like it really does open up the guests that we could potentially have on this Friday show, because we could have people coming in, dropping in to give you place your bets for the weekend. Imagine that. Please actually don't do that. I can't stand sports betting.
Well, hey, you look at how I love it. I just don't participate, but like,
I see. Okay.
But yeah, like you look at how they've weaved sports betting into like TSN or ESPN. Like, remember how it was like once like taboo? Like we just, they wouldn't even hold sports events in Vegas. And now like everything's in Vegas. And it would be very interesting to see what our coverage here would look like. Like, hey, here's the weekend spread on, where the open's going to be on live cattle future in the morning on Monday. I don't know what that's all going to look like, but that would be fascinating.
But as farmers, we gamble enough.
Exactly. And aren't some of these markets tapped out too? Like, I think some of the sports betting bubble is bursting a little bit in terms of some of the potential that there was a couple of years ago that companies were expecting in terms of revenue generation for these companies. I don't think it's quite panned out to the full potential that they expected, and I think there would be some of that issue with the extent, and I think that's kind of why FanDuel and the CME are doing this. They're trying to continue to hook new people and get new people in their system, and by going outside of sports betting into this is something that they're looking to do. But yeah, I don't know. Do you think there would be that much interest in betting on a USDA report or what the Pro Farmer Tour numbers are today, that kind of thing?
I am
from
Kelvin,
everyday Americans and Canadians. I don't know.
When I see what people are willing to bet on, why the heck not?
Oh yeah, like prop bets.
People bet on. Well, this past week is Taylor Swift playing the Super Bowl. There's like bets out there for that. There's things about like if someone will score in the first period, you can bet on that. Like it never ceases to amaze me how ridiculous humans are. So yes, absolutely, there will be people that bet on it.
Yes, get people engaged in agriculture and the value of where their food comes from and all that.
Yeah, but with gambling and therefore maybe not being able to pay their bills.
Well, nothing like having a little skin in the game to be engaged on something. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I have college age kids that are all very interested in sports. I get when I hear the kids talk and their friends come over, I get a little bit concerned. We used to be worried about our kids like smoking or doing stuff like skipping school, like stuff like that. Now it's like the access to gambling, and I'm not anti-gambler at all, but the access that kids have now to gambling, I think it's a bit of a concern. No, it's not a bit of a concern. It is a concern.
Well, but everybody's got to have a vice, Shaun, and if they can't afford to buy their own homes, they should be able to at least gamble what money they do have. Anyway,
well, in order to buy that home, you got to gamble.
Sure, you got to live cattle's going higher. Wait, lower. Oh no. Anyway.
I just thought live cattle goes nowhere but up.
Possibly?
Until it doesn't.
Until it doesn't. But like this whole New World screwworm thing is not getting better faster. So, yeesh.
I was talking earlier this week about how I think on all the different things that Secretary Rollins has worked on, the screwworm issue has maybe been her best. That's a file she seems very comfortable in dealing with. I don't know if that's the best way to put that, but that is. They're clearly trying to get the border open. Because it's been stops and starts, and it's a big issue, especially for those feed yards in places like Nebraska and Texas, because the supply of Mexican feeder cattle is. It's over 1 million head a year. Typically, it's very critical.
1 to 1.2. I didn't realize it was that many, to be honest. And it is, So that's as I said to Don Close, that's a lot of burgers. It's a lot of steaks.
Yeah.
That's wild. Anyway.
It is that. Kelvin, could we have Churchill being open year round? What's going on here?
If
Again.
it could be, and if it's not super expensive and just exorbitantly priced to do that, that's a game changer for Canada and exports from the prairies, from northern Canada. And so there was a bit of an announcement today from the Arctic Gateway Group that runs the Port of Churchill. They have signed a deal with sorry, I need to pull up the info here. What are they called? Let me see. I had it in the notes. With FedNav, which is a private shipping company that specializes in shipping in northern climates and that type of thing. And so this deal is going to focus on year-round shipping. And so to me, this is more promising than the government pouring tens of millions of dollars into the Port of Churchill. When you have a private company that has expertise in ice breaking and that type of thing, it's something to pay attention to, at least when it comes to, I'm not saying I'm all in on Churchill becoming the port of the future for central Canada, but this type of thing is a glimmer, I think, of or reason to get excited, or at least consider being excited in the future about the potential for the Port of Churchill.
I don't know how to feel about it because this just feels like one of these like promises where we're 2 weeks from being 2 weeks out, or maybe 2 years from being 2 years out. It just is it like like we've talked it up so much as like this big opportunity. Does it actually move the needle as much as we think? And I don't really know. I'm just telling you what my reaction is. It just feels like we're always talking about, well, the answer, Churchill, that will solve all of our problems. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I hope it does. I hope it is a big deal.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that have to come and fall into place, and one of them is year-round access would be huge if you could get through all that ice, and the economics just are dramatically better if you can ship 12 months of the year versus 4 months of the year, in terms of investing in facilities and all of that, and investing maybe most importantly in the railway to the port, because it is through tundra and swamp and muskeg, and that's real difficult to engineers have their work cut out for them in terms of having reliable rail access to the port. And I think that's the bigger issue here. But one of them is, if you could get ships in there year round, you can move a lot more out of that port and then you can utilize the railway in winter, which that's when things are reliable and on frozen ground. So to me, that this is, again, I'm totally with you, Shaun. I think your assessment is quite accurate, and especially there used to be more talk about global warming and how that would unlock the potential at the Port of Churchill. Well, that's real long-term thinking. If
one day we will grow corn in Churchill, I'm promising you.
Yeah. I mean, all the polar bears will be dead, but at least we can move corn.
So speaking of the polar bears, I was going to ask a question, and I wanted to disclaimer, I'm not trying to be a smartass here.
Oh.
Will we see a bunch of pushback? Is there an impact potentially on polar bears? Because the tourism factor of Churchill and polar bears, is that something that you're going to hear about if this does become a reality or not?
Polar bears will be part of it, but I think it's more so the environmental impact of, if you're moving oil, if there's oil pipeline or oil on trains moving through sensitive environmental areas, that'll be the bigger issue.
That is actually one of the major, and has been one of the major holdbacks. So there's the engineering side. There is the weather of whether or not, you can get through the ice. And then one of the other key points where this has been such a difficult journey is exactly that, is that you would be moving sensitive product through sensitive areas. So polar bears aside,
on rail lines that wash out
exactly.
almost every year or every few years.
Like it's a high risk. It is a high risk plan, but if it works, or one day when it does, it could be, incredibly. It would totally change movement and change that whole area, right? But it is definitely high risk.
So I've been traveling quite a bit the last couple of weeks, and plain Wi-Fi sucks. Can we talk about that? There needs to be some sort of a warning system where it's like, we were going to fleece you with the $8 or $20, whatever we're charging you for Wi-Fi, but it's not working. But they don't do that. You pay for it, and then they tell you, oh, it doesn't work. And by the way, thanks for your money, you sucker. Anyway, so all my travels as of late, I've been watching some shows on my phone, right? Because everything's in the cloud. So if you can't access the cloud through the internet, it's hard to do any work on the plane. And I've watched 1883 And I'm through the first season of 1923. These are the prequels to Yellowstone. And I've really enjoyed it. 1883 I thought was unbelievable. I don't understand why Tim McGraw's not acting more because he was so good at it. Anyway, it makes me think about this. One, we do not think enough about the struggles and the adversity that pioneers faced in settling the West. My God. Like, basically every day was, our goal here today is not to die. Like, really. And the other part about it, we talk about adversity in the world of agriculture and some of the things we're going through. And there is adversity, don't get me wrong. And there's a lot of risk out there. Hey, we found out 68% of Canadian farmers believe that 25 is more riskier than 24. Like, there's risk out there. But it's a different kind of risk than what those people went through in the early part of the century and in the late 1800s. Talk about, like, it was just, we're just trying to make sure that we can make it through the winter. It's incredible. And I don't think we think about it enough, Lyndsey. What do you think?
Well, and I also think that sometimes many of us wish that our forefathers and foremothers had settled elsewhere. Because one of the key parts of this, when we think about, and I think about my own family, settling in Manitoba and trying to eke out a living off the land there, like, some people really did win, like, the homesteading Olympics, and other ones have just had to continue to fight where their ancestors decided to stop. And so, yeah, it's one of those really, I find it fascinating. I also think it's hilarious that you consider these shows historical. Because guess what? They're still fictional, Shaun.
Well, of course they are, but it's a depiction.
I know that a lot of the things they portray.
Yeah, and I do a lot of
real,
checking. I have this whole game that I do. I check on accuracy to I think it's just it's an interesting visual depiction.
Yes. It is. So it is, though. I think I'm always struck by it wasn't that long ago. That's what really, I think, when I kind of do the math on, how old my great grandfather was or whatever, it wasn't that long ago. And it literally, just a few generations ago, most of our everyday was spent just feeding ourselves, right? The very basics of just keeping a roof over your head and having enough food for everybody. And it is really remarkable how far we have come in agriculture in just a few generations. So,
well, when the Haneys came north out of Montana, the one thing they did is they settled on the crappiest piece of land.
This is what I'm saying.
Oh my goodness gracious. Sorry, go ahead, Kelvin.
To me, all of this ties in a lot with our current situation as well. There's a lot of talk about urgency and threats to the world we live in and that type of thing. And yet, when urgent topics come up, people are on holidays and slow to respond and things go to voicemail and we're real comfortable in a lot of ways of life today. And we don't want to lose that. And certainly we don't take that for granted, but a lot of that was earned by that hardship that previous generations went through. And if we really think we're in an urgent situation, we need to show that. And I'm worried that things will become more dire than they have to because we're slow to react and slow to realize that we're in an urgent situation that demands productivity, that demands not being as comfortable as maybe the last couple decades have afforded us.
Like this tariff move, stalling, harvesting equipment at the border. It well and truly, this is going to interfere with harvesting a crop. And we still, regardless of how much technology we have, we still get one growing season a year to grow that crop. And maybe we get a double crop in every once in a while and here and there and whatever. But it doesn't matter how much policy stuff is happening or who's on holidays or when you can make a meeting, the calendar keeps going. And that crop is going to be ready to be harvested when it needs harvested and not on your time. So Kelvin, it's a really good point that ultimately there's real world things that don't care. There's an urgency that don't care about politics and don't care whatever. This is a crop that has to get harvested when it's ready or we lose out. And not just dollars and cents. These are food and food products. This is the most important thing.
But it's a cultural change that needs to happen. And I'm worried that we're going to be we can talk about urgency and needing to boost our productivity, but if everybody goes home at 3:00 every day, from work. Well, that's not helping productivity. That's not what got the railways through the Rocky Mountains or the pioneers out west, as in Shaun's examples of the Yellowstone shows. So it's and same thing with building the port to Churchill. I imagine the engineering feats required to build railways through the mountains probably were much more significant, especially going back 150 years in terms of technology, than what it takes to actually get Port of Churchill up and running. But again, to do big things seems just much more difficult these days when we don't have that same level of motivation, ambition behind us.
Well, there's again, when we talk about raising our productivity, we're talking about the outcome. We need to talk more about the process to achieve that outcome. We need a little bit, and not to go back to college football, Lyndsey, but we need a little bit more Nick Saban methodology to our approach to this.
I've seen YouTubes of Nick Saban. So perfect. Now you're speaking my language.
He won an Emmy last year for Game Day.
That's pretty fantastic. See? They see, Shaun, this is the key. You just have to make it relatable to people like me. And
there
then
you go.
We'll all care about your sports.
Yeah.
Okay,
well, we got to wrap up here, but I'm very fascinated by the treks and the struggles and the adversity that people went through from like that 1850 through early 1900s in the settlement of the West. There's a bunch of vacation time I want to use to tour some of those things. My wife not as interested. She's not.
Kelsey Breeze. She can go elsewhere. That might, you know what? I think actually this will be really healthy for you, Shaun. These are vacations you should do on your own, or better yet, drag your children. That's what you should.
Oh yeah, because they're they're even more disinterested. Yeah, exactly. Very cool stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, we're out of time here. I want to thank everybody out in the Real Agriculture audience for making us part of your day and tuning in to us. This is our passion. We just love bringing some of the stories and providing you with the insights. And please provide your feedback. shaney@realagriculture.com. Have yourselves a great weekend, and we'll chat next week. Cheers, everybody.